Hi everyone, welcome to a very special edition of the ITSM crowd. We are joined today by two of the masterminds behind ITIL 4, and we're going to take a deep dive into all things ITIL 4 really, where it came from, how it was produced, and really with a bit of a focus on the training side of things as well. So digging a little bit into what the qualification scheme looks like, who's the best audience for each of the courses, and just a little bit more about how it's going to help people in their career as well. The reason that we're doing this, and we're very grateful to AXELOS for supporting us, is because ITSM Zone has launched its ITIL 4 Managing Professional program. So I'll share a little bit of information about that throughout the episode, and you will see at the end, and you will see underneath the YouTube video, a link that will get you a discount if you are looking at becoming an ITIL 4 Managing Professional. But main aim today is knowledge sharing. It's not about promotion. So I think a good place to start would be to have our guests introduce themselves. So Akshay, if I can start with you, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, Claire, and thanks for having us on. It's a privilege, honestly, and hi to everybody out there in cyberspace. So my name is Akshay Anand. I am the product ambassador for ITIL. What that means is, in the olden days, that is before March 2020, I used to go around to various conferences, events, corporate visits even, and promote IT service management, promote ITIL on occasion as well, and work with partners and including the folks at ITSM Zone to make the most out of the guidance that we were publishing through TSO and blogs and webinars and so on. The other half of my job is to basically be Roman's tea boy. So I used to bring him tea when we were developing all the modules. Seriously, I've been doing a lot of work on the development side. I was a member of ITIL 4's lead architect team. I've been involved with the development of every book in ITIL 4, whether that's authoring, reviewing, exam question writing, you name it. And that's me.
Fantastic, thank you. And Roman?
Hello everyone. My name is Roman Jouravlev. Nobody can pronounce my surname, so I decided even not to put it here. We work together with Akshay on leading ITIL for content development. So basically, the way I usually introduce myself is this: if you don't like something in the content of ITIL 4, I'm the person to blame. If you like something in ITIL 4 content, then there is a long list of contributors who made it really good. Please just take some time, have a look at the end of each book or practice publication, and think something or say something good about all those people. It was a fantastic team for each book. And we just had to let them express themselves and do a perfect job that they did. And I joined AXELOS just like Akshay about 4 years ago. So we joined in autumn 2016, specifically for the ITIL 4 update project from different background. And since then, we are in ITIL 4. And before that, I was working mostly as a trainer and consultant in ATSM space, mostly back in Russia, which I originate from.
Thank you very much. That's great. And just a reminder for those of you who are watching us live, and I see there's quite a few of you online already, you can ask Akshay and Roman questions using YouTube comments. If you put a question into the YouTube comments, it'll come up on screen. We'll be able to bring it in and answer it. So if there's anything you want to know about ITIL 4, then now's the time to ask, I guess. I think Roman and Akshay do seem to get around a little bit on the publicity tour, but this is a golden opportunity to ask them whatever you want to ask them about ITIL 4. So by all means, do use the YouTube comments for that. But the first thing that I wanted to do, oh, here we go. Here's just an example. So Ivana here is saying, looking forward to the webinar, all of the insights from our ITIL experts. So for everybody else who's watching, this is what we can do if you've got questions that you want to bring up. So thank you very much for that, Ivana. So a good place to start, I think, is the background for ITIL 4. So some of us who've been in service management probably slightly longer than we want to remember have vague recollections of earlier versions of ITIL. So there was version 2 with the 3-hour written exams, version 3, the 2011 update to version 3, and now ITIL 4. So what prompted the decision to develop ITIL 4, and what was the overall outcome that you wanted to achieve?
Actually, 6 hours writing exam for version 2.
Yeah.
2 parts of 3. Yeah, we're not going that way this time, but we'll share a little about how we are trying to approach higher levels of certification these days without long handwriting, which could be a challenge itself for today's IT people. Well, I believe it was quite obvious that ITIL needed an update because we lived with version which was originally created back in 2007 and then updated in 2011 for, well, 10 years effectively. And just a bit more if we count from 2007, a bit less than from 2011. And industry has been changing all this time, and ITIL less so. And we really needed some guidance which would take all the recent developments into account, technology developments, and management developments, such as emergence of cloud. David Cannon, who was the lead editor for Service Strategy back in 2011, and now lead editor for Digital and IT Strategy book on ITIL 4, keeps telling this, keeps giving this as an example. Back in 2011, ITIL authors did not see that cloud will change the landscape so dramatically. And we needed to factor in these and other changes like this. And obviously, management changes such as emergence of DevOps and other approaches which we couldn't just oversee. And not only to update the content was our goal, but also to create a new architecture that would remove the need for the next major update for, let's say, longer time. I cannot say that we created the product that will be continually updated and that will be sufficient forever, but at least we created way more, let's say, microservice-like product and less monolithic. And if the working practices of IT service management, of IT management will be changing tomorrow, and they will be, then we have a very good way of keeping ITIL up to date without waiting for another major update for another 10 years, which was basically achieved by removing the practice guides from the core books and publishing them online as separate publications, 34 separate publications. So that was an important architectural goal. So I would probably limit it to this too, to update the content to reflect what has happened in the last 10 years in the industry, and to create the guidance which would be more agile itself and easier to update and to evolve to reflect the upcoming changes that we are not aware of yet. Akshay, anything to add?
Well, so Roman explained his background, and I neglected to do so. So first, apologies for that. But my career in service management has been predominantly that of a consultant and consultant advisory services, that sort of thing. And I think we balance off well in our perspectives. And one of the things that I've seen in my career is that practitioners tend to cherry pick bits of the guidance, not necessarily the whole picture. Yeah. And so despite all the great intentions, and I think ITIL version 3 had a lot of amazing things in it, practitioners didn't always see the big picture, remember the big picture, which resulted in things like seeing ITIL as a process framework rather than a holistic management framework, those sorts of things. And I think a couple of years ago, when I started talking about the ITIL update, internally it was codenamed ITIL X, because we hadn't decided yet on a brand name. When I started talking about that, I was saying that there's two key lessons that we need to always keep in mind. We have to reinforce adapt and adopt, and we have to reinforce continual improvement. Because in the wild, outside of the trainers and maybe the hardcore consultants, very few people actually remember adapt and adopt and continually improve. And that was, for me, that was one of the big things going into the sort of architecture workshops of ITIL 4.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe, I don't know if it's an IT person tendency, but we do tend to look for formulas. What's the 10 steps we have to follow to have perfect service management. So I can see that. So we've got ITIL 4, which is quite significantly different to ITIL version 3. But one of the questions that I see when I'm working with people in the different forums, they're asking about training, is they're asking, should I take ITIL version 3 or 4? I can see that both training streams are running in parallel at the moment. Is there kind of a timetable to sunset ITIL version 3, or do you think those two will continue in parallel almost indefinitely?
You want to take that, Ramon, or you want me to take that?
I can start. Yeah.
I
believe there are two important perspectives of this question. One is whether the guidance is relevant. The other one is whether you should take, let's say, older exam or go for the new ones. I really like a post that it was Anton Likov from Microservice who posted this yesterday on Facebook, explaining his view on this. And the view is this: you don't need, let's say, high-level physics, quantum theory, or some relativism theories, if your task at hand is to do something very, very, let's say, simple and limited to the familiar 3 dimensions. And if you have enough tools from what you experienced previously from your version 2 or version 3 guidance, you have sufficient value from those tools for the tasks at hand, feel free to continue using those tools. There is no requirement to upgrade to version 4 from the practitioner's perspective.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have this experience, if you have little experience in version 2 or 3, you do not need to go through them in order to benefit from version 4. Because version 4 generally includes what we had and what is still relevant in version 2 and 3. And if your tasks are limited to, let's say, organizing a support team, you can start with ITIL 4 Foundation and relevant practices from the My ITIL environment. So for incident management, service request management, service desk, that will be a good start. And you don't need to go deeper into, let's say, previous geological layers. So if you have a good foundation and the of previous versions, you may benefit from using ITIL 4 as a step up, as a step to a wider understanding of service management. If you don't need this step, stay where you are. And if you don't have that foundation, ITIL 4 does not require it in order to start. You can start with ITIL 4, and there is a very convenient path with ITIL 4 through foundation to a year, 1 year free access to all practices. But generally, value for money for foundation level is definitely higher. Because after passing the exam, you have access to about 1,000 worth pages of practical content, which was not the case and still is not the case for version 3.
Yeah.
So, this is the practitioner's perspective. From certification perspective, we have not announced any sunset date for the previous version, for version 3, nor for the managing professional transition. That paths are open, and we will make sure that when we announce this sunset, we will make it well in advance so people could adjust their plans, including training organizations and actual end users. My belief, it will happen eventually. I don't think the training offering and certification offering will coexist forever. The books probably will, because the guidance is still relevant depending on what you do. Did I actually answer the right question? Or
yes, you absolutely did. And I'm going to pause here while we're talking about kind of the context for ITIL 4 and just bring in a couple of questions that we've had. And just a reminder, because I can see some new people have joined us, you can use YouTube comments to ask Roman and Akshay questions if you want to during this live broadcast. If you're watching it on catch up, both of them very active on social media, so follow-up questions there. But while we're live, this is a golden opportunity. So the first question we've got here is about how ITIL 4 relates to current technologies. And I think it's an important question, especially for those of us who've been in service management for a longer time, because it used to be very much that service managers classed themselves as technology agnostic, and to a certain extent a lot of service managers didn't get involved in any of the technical side of things. It was all about the processes, the outcomes, and the tools that we used were seen as less important. But in the sort of the previous 3 to 5 years, I think with things like DevOps becoming much more prevalent in how we work, agile development, software never really being done, a lot of service managers have had to actually pick up some technology knowledge, some of them quite quickly. So does ITIL 4 relate to technology more than perhaps previous versions did?
Your turn.
Thanks. I believe so. It's important to keep in mind that ITIL is a service management framework, and I want to stress the word management there. So ITIL is not going to tell you the best way to configure a container so that you can deploy it onto Google Cloud or port it between Google Cloud and AWS. We're not going to get to that level of technical detail in a framework like ITIL. The best way I respond to this question, though, I can answer this question, though, is I believe the future of service management, and ITIL is part of that, ITIL 4 is part of that, is service managers now need to become brokers of conversations, mediators of agreements between various stakeholders. This is not just development and operations. You've got to look at the sort of whole end-to-end flow, if you will. So it's bringing customer perspectives, regulator perspectives, internal GRC perspectives, supplier perspectives, engineering perspectives, etc., to be able to say what's the best way in which we can govern, architect the products, the services that we are using to create value with all these stakeholders. So in order to be able to have that kind of a conversation, in order to be able to mediate those sorts of agreements, you need to have some working knowledge of the various components you're dealing with. It's not just the technology. You need to have some understanding of the business environment in which you operate, the regulations under which it doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer or a policy maker, but you need to have an appreciation of what's going on. And that also applies to technology. You might not be developing applications in the cloud. You might not be managing a CI/CD pipeline, but you need to have an appreciation of what they are and their role in creating value for various stakeholders so that you can have those sorts of conversations.
I think that's fair. Have you got anything you want to add to that, Roman?
A lot.
First of all,
I would start with recommendation. No matter what, do not be a lawyer or a policymaker. But at least not in ITSM. What I wanted to add, there is an important key concept even at foundation level that we are put in ITIL 4, which is the 4 dimensions of service management. And one of the key changes at the architectural level in ITIL 4 is that we really tried to move away from purely process-focused approach to a balanced approach, which would address our value streams and processes, information and technology, which is the subject of the question, organization, people, and partners and suppliers. And when it comes to information and technology, we definitely paid attention to how information and technology tools can help to every practice that we described in practice guides in the 34 of them. So there is a dedicated chapter explaining what types of tools may be helpful in that or those activities in every practice. And this is a level of detail. We went much deeper than the previous versions. At the same time, yes, we are trying to remain product agnostic. It's less technology agnostic and more product agnostic. We don't recommend any specific brands or tools, but we recognize that there are management activities and management practices, approaches that cannot be done on paper. DevOps is not possible without CI/CD automation, without the pipeline automation, or without cloud and digital infrastructure solutions. So there are other examples where certain management approaches are just not achievable without certain technology. So what happened in these 10 years that we had since the version 3 was released, some technology became, service management became digitized. It went or undergone certain digital transformation itself. And definitely we couldn't ignore it. And probably the most detailed description of how these technologies can be used in the context of ITIL 4 can be found in the high velocity IT publication, HVAT publication. Although each publication, each of the core books, DSV, DEEDS, they all include some technology considerations, but HVAT probably is the most modern one in that sense.
Well, the CDS publication, sorry, Roman, I was going to say, interject and say the CDS publication itself, the table of contents is structured around the 4 dimensions. So there's an entire section in the CDS book, which we talk about, being the engine room of the service value chain, where you're designing, transitioning, obtaining or building service components, delivering and support live products and services. There's an entire section in that book which is focused on current technologies.
So the one-word answer to Joseph's question is closely.
I think next question we'll start with the short answer, and then if we need to, we'll go to a long answer.
Well, the next question, I'm not even sure I want to show you this question as a training provider who's just finished all of our courses, but Bhavin's asking, COVID's had an impact on everything. Has this had any impact on the ITIL 4 content, and is 4.x coming sooner than we think? So I'm hoping not, but I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say.
Because of the question on the screen, I was not sure how many fingers you were just demonstrating.
It's a 4, isn't it?
Exactly, that's what I looked at. What seemed to me. Actually, if you don't mind, I will start here as well, because I just finished a couple of presentations on a very similar topic on certain events, and these presentations were titled ITIL 4 in 2020 and 2020 in ITIL 4. Because the point is that we were finishing the digital and IT strategy publication in 2020. So the development cycle ended at the end of May. So we just didn't have any other options than to absorb what was happening around us and address it in the book. And this applies also to a number of practices. The last release of the practice guides was on 1st of May. So they were actually written when all this COVID situation was unfolding. And if you look at workforce and talent management, organizational change management,
strategy management,
of course, yes. So practices that relate to strategy, the strategy publication, and into the strategy publication itself, you will find that it is actually very useful and relevant for the current situation. In the shortest possible way, we really tried to create a guidance that would help organizations to get ready or to prepare better for the uncertain world. Not specifically for COVID or quarantine, but for business and wider than business environment that keeps changing all the time in some not so predictable way. Because this will go, something else will happen. And generally, more agile, more incremental strategy planning approach, and more sustainable approach to strategy and generally to managing the organization, to leading organizations, is what we really tried to bake into strategy management book and in digital and data strategy book and strategy management practice and some other high-level practices. We really tried to help organizations in surviving and even prospering in the uncertain, also volatile and complex and ambiguous world. Hopefully we succeeded. We will see soon. But we really tried to.
So what I'm hearing is ITIL 4.1 not immediately planned.
No, ITIL 4A, for that part, ITIL 4 is already designed for uncertain world. B, as I mentioned earlier, the very architecture of ITIL 4 implies that if tomorrow, let's say strategy management will change again because of what is going on, or continuity management will have to be updated because of different continuity events and strategies that we are observing now, then we can just update a single or a number of practices without going for a major update of ITIL.
Yeah, it's a good plan. Akshay, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was going to say that, look, it's been 18 months since we launched ITIL Foundation, and we've been running really hot in terms of delivering the entire ITIL 4 library, for lack of a better word. But since February last year, we have been receiving lots of feedback from the community, whether that's from trainers or consultants or practitioners, members of other bodies of knowledge, etc. And to an extent, we acknowledge them. For example, in October last year, for those of you who don't know, we made a decision very early on to change the name of a practice from change control to change enablement to reflect some of that feedback and pushback that we've been receiving. And I think we are now at a really great time to start looking at all the other feedback we've been receiving and saying, well, what are they asking us to change? What's the impact of that going to be? Not just for, let's say, a book, but in terms of the impact on publications, the impact on the wider ecosystem. And so, is this a good thing to do or not? Is this where we want to take ITIL as a framework, as a management framework? Is this the right direction? Is this what we need to be reflecting? And so, I don't want to call it 4.x. I'd like to say, one of the things that we've always been very clear about is that we're not going to wait for another 10-year cycle and then release ITIL 5 or whatever the branding team chooses to call it then. What we want to be able to do is to push these small bits of improvement as we get those bits of feedback coming in. And so that is our commitment, that we will be incrementally improving over time.
That makes sense. So thank you very much for that question. So you just mentioned it's kind of 18 months since the ITIL Foundation went live. So, presumably huge numbers of exams, publications sold since that point. What sort of feedback have you had from the community? Are people starting to use ITIL 4? Are you seeing kind of big bang changes in companies, or is it more incremental? How are organizations adopting ITIL 4?
That's an ambassador question.
It's a really good question. I think many companies have invested in prior versions of ITIL, whether that was in terms of certifying staff or training staff, whether that was how they chose to set up their tooling, organizational structures, etc., etc. And one of the other, we were talking about going into ITIL 4. What were we thinking about? There's a slide I have in a deck somewhere, which is about the 6 design principles that we had in the back of our mind when we were, as we've developed all the ITIL 4 guidance. But one of them was that we needed ITIL 4 to be evolutionary, which is to say we couldn't tell, it made no sense to say, whatever you have right now, you may think it's working for you, but it's not. So here's a new shiny thing, and you've got to go to that immediately. We wanted to be able to provide people with the reassurance that their investments were still valid. They were still providing them with value. But if they needed to take that next step, they needed to move into a more modern way of doing things, then ITIL 4 was there to help you. And I think that philosophy, that approach has been embraced quite enthusiastically. Yes, we do see a lot of organizations who have been investing in ITIL 4, firstly with the training, but now we're seeing the case studies emerging. And on the AXELOS Content Hub, on AXELOS.com, you will see a number of case studies that we're now starting to provide, which talk about how organizations have successfully started their ITIL 4 adoption, not just the certification, but actually changing their ways of working. I think, I mean, of course, we're still in that sort of transition period where a lot of the success can be, of course, attributed to ITIL version 3, and rightly so. But, you know, there was a case study that was published as early as September or October of last year, which was for a company called Amadeus, who handle a lot of the behind-the-scenes supply chain for the airline industry. And that was a pure ITIL 4 case study where they took the guiding principles and adopted that and created radical change in their organization to improve their customer satisfaction and so on. This month, I know we've published CERN, you know, the guys with the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. We've published University of Oxford. There are a number of other case studies that we've been publishing. So now we're starting to see companies come out and say, yes, we adopted it. It's been successful. Here's a description of what we've done and why it's worked for us. Oh, City of Pittsburgh, their police department, actually, I think it was police department, actually just deployed ITIL across the entire police department. Very, very successful. And that case study, if not already published, should be published pretty shortly. So we are starting to see all those case studies and success stories come out now. And that's been very gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Question here from Vishal, which we kind of said that, you know, ITIL's not promoting any particular tool, but are you aware of the service management tool providers incorporating elements of ITIL 4 into their products? Is there anybody that you've worked with on this?
So, of course, every company's roadmap, tool vendor's roadmap, is their closely guarded secret. So we do get involved with discussions as and when. A lot of organizations have built in more the automation and the platform. They've created the automation on the platform that will allow you to unlock value with ITIL 4. So whilst there might not be any value stream designer embedded in, you know, your tool of choice, I think it's a matter of time, because, you know, techniques like value stream mapping are certainly not new to the world. Lean has been talking about this for ages. So I think we will start to see more and more tools reflecting some of the core concepts in ITIL 4 given time. Having said that, I would like to highlight that there have been a few companies which have been more open about their alignment, if you will, with ITIL 4 and some of the philosophies espoused in ITIL 4. Atlassian is certainly one that comes to mind, and I've co-authored a paper with them. I've done a couple of webinars and spoken at their conference, virtual conference as well. And they're very keen on talking about the fact that Atlassian is not just a tool provider. They also have things like management playbooks or practitioner playbooks, which is a collection of not just workflows, but also cultural artifacts, ways of thinking, ways of working, etc. A lot of which align with ITIL 4's overall philosophy. And I think that's where, personally, I think that's where the conversation should start. It's about how do we want to work, rather than does my tool do ITIL 4.
Makes sense. Roman, anything to add?
Not about the success in the implementation, but from my conversation with vendors, I would probably highlight one thing. Just like we really tried to get rid of the silos in organizations and in management approach, we are trying to, let's say, endorse removal of this silo mentality from the tools design, like a tools architecture. But it's not about how many processes you can automate. It's not about how many like template processes you can put in your tool and then certify with certain certification or just declare being automated. It's about the ability of the tool to architect a workflow or a value stream that would involve relevant elements from different practices, described as different practices. Automate real value streams and real workflows of organizations, rather than dictate certain predefined procedures from a book. And if a tool allows to reflect the value streams and to use certain functional component from different practices, it is more likely to enable value creation in the organization than if it formally includes elements of all 34 or any large number of practices in question. And I was really happy to see that when we discuss it with the key vendors, they generally share this view, and they try to achieve this, let's say, value stream level flexibility and value stream mapping, incorporating different practices into holistic views, into holistic streams.
Thank you. Thank you for the question as well. So the purpose of this webinar is to dig into the training a little bit more as well. Specifically the managing professional side of things, but it would be good to talk about the strategic leader element as well, because there's some quite significant changes on the strategic leader side of things to perhaps what people are used to. So yeah. I guess maybe a good place to start, and I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this, but kind of talking to everyone about how the scheme is structured, and again what the intention was behind things like the two different sides to the qualification scheme.
Roman and I are looking at each other. Okay.
Do you want me to do it?
So the way we envision it, if you will, the foundation is, that entry level qualification, that entry level learning. It's for someone who, sure, you might have a very senior person coming in for the first time, but it's your entryway into that certification scheme. The data says that the majority of people who are taking it are people who are new to IT service management and relatively junior in their career. So very much your entry level qualification. Managing professional modules were designed for people a bit further ahead in their career. So people who were designing or managing teams or teams of teams, and they needed to know more about best practices in managing stakeholders, in creating the appropriate metrics and measurements, or in supporting high velocity aspirations, or running a service organization or service team. So it was more about the management and the design and management of those systems is what the sort of focus of managing professional is. We do have one module which is common between managing professional and strategic leader, and that's direct, plan, and improve. And the focus of that is, as it says on the tin, how you provide an organization with the appropriate direction. How do you make sure that your planning is at the appropriate granularity, at the appropriate cycle? How do you make sure you embed continual improvement across your organization? And at a very high level, what does organizational change management look like? Which is why it applies to both the design and management, because you do some sort of transformation, change, that sort of thing there, as well as in a strategic leader, although the scale at which you apply that guidance changes. And so strategic leader, again, as it says on the tin, is for the leaders who are concerned with strategy. They're concerned with the strategy of the service organization and how to make sure that the service organization is sustainable against its competitors in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment, and so on. So that's how the different modules or learning streams were broken out. And
we've got ITIL Master, I think, still at the top. Is there any detail on ITIL Master that you could share?
So now that we've delivered digital IT strategy, now it's the appropriate time to go back to ITIL Master and say, what does a master level qualification look like now that we've delivered all the building blocks of ITIL 4? We couldn't actually take a look at it until we delivered the building blocks. So we are starting to take a look at it. Unfortunately, I don't have a date as to when the ITIL Master scheme is going to be refreshed. We will be communicating all of that on website, social media. I'm sure, doing lots of talks about it. But the ITIL Master scheme, as was published previously, is still live. So if people are interested, they can go to the AXELOS website or the PeopleCert website. They can read up about what it is. It's what we've known over the years, sort of like a thesis or a defense of work that has been done to improve an organization by adopting ITIL guidance. Right now, that phraseology is couched in ITIL version 3 wording, but for my mind, the same principles still apply. Were you able to create organizational change, which is something we talk about, service transition? You may have to say, this is what I did in service strategy, as opposed to this is what I did related to this component of the service value system. But that's something that we're now starting to look at. How would we update all that assessment to bring it in line with the terminology, the concepts, etc. of ITIL 4?
Makes sense. Thank you. And the kind of the driver behind this conversation today was us launching our managing professional program at ITSM Zone, because what we always found with the version 3 training was most people aspired to become ITIL experts. They didn't necessarily want to take just service strategy or just service transition. They could see that expert was a level that they would aim towards, and my gut feel is that with managing professional, it's going to be very similar, and people will want to achieve that status. So I think if we could look at each of the courses in a little bit more detail and kind of think about who the audience is, what you think are some of the kind of the exciting things that people are going to learn about, and in no particular order. In fact, I think that's probably the first question. Is there an order that you recommend people do the training in? Does it fit together in any kind of sequence, or is it more about where people are right now in their career?
It's a very, very good question. One that we get a lot, and one that we debate internally a lot as well. But Roman, you're the ex-trainer, so why don't you take this question first? And if I have any other thoughts, I'll chip in.
Claire, correct me if I'm wrong. There is no such thing as an ex-trainer. Well, definitely start with foundation.
Mm-hmm.
When you successfully pass your foundation, you will get a voucher for 100% discount for access to all the practices in my AXELOS.
Mm-hmm.
Read them. I mean, don't read them all. But it's a tool set that is unlocked and that is supposed to be used based on your foundation knowledge, and there are problems that you are trying to solve or objectives you are trying to achieve. So do not ignore that. It would be just a significant waste of your previous efforts with foundation. When you are so one approach is that you just solve your current issues using the practice guidance, and that can be, for some people, that will be sufficient. But most likely, you will identify that in your areas of interest, in your areas of responsibility, you might benefit from some guidance on how to use these practices together for some higher level objectives. And this is where managing professional modules will be handy. So the most familiar one, the most traditional ITSM one is the CDS, the one that was basically released, one of the first. And this helps to have a better look, maybe a slightly fresher look at what we used to know as service life cycle, managing the life cycle of the services. And now we include products, so creation included. So from ideation to actual operation. And that will help to improve your management of service life cycle. If the organization you work for or in is suffering or enjoying a digital transformation, is considering a higher level of digitization of the business processes, changing operating model, business models using digital technology, and you are a practitioner rather than a strategist, then High Velocity IT will provide you with a lot of interesting and useful tools for digitizing whatever you are doing. So that will be a good combination, CDS to improve your holistic picture of the service lifecycle, and HVAT to digitize this picture, if you will. My favorite one, I'm slightly biased because this is the book when I was more involved in the authoring more than in others, is Drive Stakeholder Value.
Mm-hmm.
This is a book that probably first book in ITIL that provides guidance for organizations in their consumer role, as well as to organizations in their providers role. Traditionally, ITIL is perceived as guidance for service providers, but we recognize from Foundation that these days, every organization is a service provider and a service consumer. And we just change our hats as we consider certain pair in our service relationship. We cannot provide our services using purely our own resources. We are not self-sufficient. So even if we are service providers, we still need to be good service consumers. And that book introduces a concept of the service journey from exploration of opportunities in the service market to realization of the value from that opportunities through engagement, negotiation, onboarding, co-creation. So, and every step of this journey is described for both consumers and providers. And that includes all levels, from operational level, where service desk is involved, to strategic level, where we manage relationship with strategic suppliers or strategic consumers. So if you are in the interaction part of your business at any level, or you are managing this interaction, then DSV is for you. And finally, direct plan and improve can be described in the shortest possible way as the combination of strategy, service strategy, continual service improvement, and practitioner. Are the beats that are most relevant for leaders, for managers, at tactical and to some extent to strategic level. At strategic level. And just two lines more to this. For each module, the syllabus of the module includes some references to examinable content of the dedicated book, but also a collection of practices, and some content from the practices is examinable. And my recommendation to the end users, to people who will be undergoing the training, do study the practices in detail. Do not limit your study to the examinable bits. And my recommendation to training providers would be, do not limit your training to the examinable bit. And generally, do not train people for certification, train them for. And in this sense, feel free to expand the number of practices involved in your training for each topic and the coverage of each practice to make it practically useful. And if your training provider fails to do that, read the practices.
That makes sense. And I think it's maybe one of the nice things about ITIL FAR is seeing some of the efforts to kind of add more value with the training. It's, you know, we're lucky as an e-learning company. If we want to add things into the syllabus, we have no time constraints. But the other area where things have really changed quite significantly is on the strategic leader side with the DITS course, which
we're terrible when it comes to creating acronyms.
But to be ditzy, what's different about that?
Roman, you take this. You were come on.
All the training questions.
My most favorite baby. So yeah, we can tell for hours just about this. We had a challenge. We wanted to include ability to practically apply certain planning and management skills in the certification, into people's assessment. We didn't want to limit strategic training or strategic certification to multiple choice question exam. At the same time, we need scalability. We cannot invite people to write for 6 hours some essays that will then take ages to mark, to assess, and won't be available in most of non-English markets. And so that definitely was not an option. So we needed some approach to assessing going into technical details at the fourth Bloom level. So assessing people's ability to analyze and apply their knowledge in a specific context without making it too complicated. And the solution that we came up with is to include a number of mandatory practices, case study. If it's a group class, which we still remember that they exist, so it's a group exercise. If it's an online learning, it can be also a group exercise in breakout rooms. If it's a self-paced online learning, then it's a written assignment with a mandatory feedback loop between the trainer and the student. And these assignments are required as part of the certification study, and they assess people's ability to apply their knowledge in one of the three provided fictional companies. They form one case study. The companies are connected, related to each other, they work with each other, but only one is selected as a guinea pig for each student's training. And then these assignments are assessed by trainers, and these assessment results are submitted to PeopleCert, to our examination institute, and passing this assignment is a required prerequisite to sit the following multiple choice exam, which will then test people's understanding of certain concepts and ideas from the book in a very usual ITIL way. So we have like a practical and theoretical certification parts, and the practical one is new. And I would like to emphasize also that another important new thing that is not obvious to the students, but important for them, is that trainers that want to train the digital and data strategy training, they also are required to not only pass all these assignments, but also to have an interview with one of the accredited assessors, which were involved in development of the assignments, to confirm their ability to teach and run this type of format and not just read the slides. So we expect that generally the quality of training will be improving with new requirements for the trainers, which we also have first time in ITIL for this training. Anything to add, Akshay?
No, I was actually going to talk about the content of it rather than the assessment. Because I thought that's where Claire was coming from with her question. Because as I talked about earlier, digital and IT strategy is about things like business models, operating models. And Roman mentioned business and operating models when he was talking about high velocity IT, but the key difference is if you're the person who's actually developing the business model, the operating model, and working to differentiate yourself from competitors, the organization from the competitors, that's the sort of thing that you're going to be doing as a leader, and that's what you're going to be learning about in digital and IT strategy. If somebody elsewhere in the organization has said, right, we're going to be, moving to a high velocity way of working, and we're changing our business model, and you're in charge of changing the systems and executing on that change, high velocity is for you. So although there's a lot of concepts which actually are repeated across multiple books, the focus and the perspective is different. So we cover risk management in both Direct Plan and Improve and in digital IT strategy, but the perspective is different. Organizational change management, similarly.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good holistic answer there, because I am very interested in the changes to the training, and I think that's going to be a big change for people. But the content as well is important, and that kind of strategic level. So we're actually coming to the end of our time. We've kind of doubled the length of this, but it's still gone really quickly. We always try and wrap up ITSM crowds with kind of top tips, resources. So what would you recommend for the people who are watching us? Where should they go now? What should they be looking at, reading? Akshay, I'll come to you first, and I know you've shared a few links, so I'm just going to pop those up on screen as well.
Yeah, there's a wealth of information on the AXELOS website. My AXELOS or my ITIL, which Roman was referring to, that's the repository for all the practices. And there's, that link, axelos.com/my-axelos is where you'll find it. The Content Hub is where we publish all our case studies, blogs, white papers, etc. And the ITIL 4 Foundation page is sort of a landing page to start you off on ITIL 4 in general. But apart from the AXELOS websites themselves, I'd say ITSM Zone's own page provides a lot of good information about ITIL 4. So take a look at that. Reach out on social media, not just myself or Claire or Roman. There are a lot of ITSM professionals, whether they're consultants, trainers, or practitioners, using Twitter, using LinkedIn. Search for the hashtag ITIL4. You'll find a lot of conversations taking place. I find that LinkedIn is starting to become a good place for ITIL4 related conversation. Twitter used to be, but at least maybe it's the people I follow. Twitter now seems to be more focused on software development than ITIL. So maybe that's just the people I'm following. There's also a really good Facebook group called Back to ITSM. It is a closed group. You can apply to join Back to ITSM. But the way I put it is if LinkedIn was the foundation level discussions and Twitter is the managing professional level discussions, and for me, Back to ITSM is the strategic level type of discussions. There is a marked difference in the level of maturity of the sort of conversations that are happening. And by no means is Back to ITSM or any of these other platforms exclusionary, but you have to know where to get the information you're looking for. Some platforms will have more of a focus on a particular topic. Reddit, r/ITIL, is filled with people just talking about ITIL 4 Foundation, top tips to pass the exam, where to get more resources, blogs, etc., etc. They don't really talk much about managing professional or strategic leaders. So you have to know which social media platform to go to for information.
That's good advice. And I think the AXELOS webinar that you've been doing recently as well, I've been listening to that and enjoying that. So I'd add that to the list. Roman, anything else that you'd like to share?
Nothing that I'm aware of on TikTok so far. But since you mentioned the webinars, there is another thing that Akshay basically created. We started a series of podcasts. People who are really annoyed to see us can stand us talking and find us on podcasts, and all those are, again, if you just search on any platform for ITIL 4, your usual podcast platform, you will find a number of interesting conversations, mostly because other people are involved there. It's not just the two of us. We had really interesting talks with lead editors of actually all the books and practices.
So one of the things, thank you for plugging that. I wasn't sure whether I can plug my own work. It seems a bit immodest.
Why not?
But one of the things we've also started to do, apart from the podcast, is we've been doing some live streams on YouTube, similar to what we're doing now. Now, this isn't officially on the schedule yet. We haven't started advertising it, but I am putting together a panel of trainers to come in and talk about ITIL Foundation, sort of a top tips to pass ITIL 4 Foundation. Claire, thank you very much for being part of that panel. And to the audience, you'll find out more information about where to sign up for that live stream, etc., on the AXELOS social media channels, mine, as well as Claire's, as soon as it's scheduled. But it's likely to happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks, fingers crossed. But that's really going to be focused on ITIL 4 Foundation, top tips from trainers from around the world as well. And we're probably going to pick some questions from the publicly available sample paper on the AXELOS website, look at some of those questions and say, right, how would you go about answering this question? How would you go about figuring out?
I'm not so sure about this anymore, actually.
Claire, I'm pretty sure you're sick of the sample paper at this point. You should be able to answer it in your sleep.
We'll see. So thank you so much for that, both of you. It just remains for me to mention the fact that we have launched our ITIL 4 Managing Professional program at ITSM Zone. So for those of you who know us from the expert days, very similar package. We give you a year to take all the training that you need. You get all the usual support that you would expect from us, and you can, as an attendee of this webinar, get an exclusive discount. So you can see the link here, and it will be under the video on YouTube as well. We have 2 more ITSM Crowd episodes scheduled, which are on the 5th of November. This is going back to the Jigsaw organisation publication. So we did 5 episodes last week where we talked about this, but more advice on how to build back better after what's been a troubling 2020 for most of us, specifically focusing on people and skills. So that's with Karen Ferris and Matthew Burrows, and service integration and management, where we've got Ian and Pat from Siamic joining us, and also Ian Thomas. So really good ones not to be missed if you can make it. Huge thank you, Akshay and Roman. Like I said, we doubled the time for this, but it still feels like we could have gone on significantly longer. And just a little thank you there from one of our attendees as well. Bhavin did actually share that he's quite relieved that ITIL 4.x isn't on the horizon anytime soon. So thank you to everybody who's been watching us as well, and thank you for your questions and your input. It's much appreciated. And we will see you all on the next episode of the ITSM Crowd. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Everyone. Bye bye.